This is a new version of NuPhy's Halo series, and it's a bit of a confusing one. See, this is still the Halo V2, just like this 75% model that I reviewed last year, and also like this 65% model that I reviewed just a few weeks ago. This new model, though, is different. It's the Halo V2IO series, a new spin on this existing design where the headlining change, and hence the new name, is a shift from using open source QMK customization software to using proprietary NuPhyIO software. And while that's the primary change, there's actually way more that's different here than I initially expected. Now, my goal in this video is to break down what those changes are so that you can understand exactly what you'd be getting going with this new model compared to the old one. As a disclaimer, NuPhy did send this new keyboard over to me for review in addition to these older models, but they continue to have no say in how I choose to cover them and what videos I produce. They're also continuing to offer you guys code Cameron on their site to save $10 on any order over $100. And as a special for this IO series release, they're offering code Cameron15, which can save you $15 on any purchase of a Halo V2 IO series keyboard specifically. So if this winds up being the right answer for you, there's a little bit of extra savings in it this time around. As usual, you can find all the links to these products down in the video description. And now with all that out of the way, let's jump into the details. Before we get into the nitty-gritty around QMK versus NuPhyIO, let's run through some of the physical changes that differentiate the new IO series. The first and easily most visible change is the move away from a full translucent bottom case. On the original models, that entire bottom case was see-through, letting you admire the color-matched internals and to see the lights around the outside of the case, which gave this model its Halo name. The new version changes to a solid colored bottom case, which is still plastic by the way, but is now polycarbonate instead of ABS. What remains is a thin strip of translucent material around the middle of the entire case. This creates a more focused halo light that comes just through this one area rather than the entire bottom of the case. I'm really curious to see which of these options you guys actually prefer. As much as I love the clear bottom design, I did always point out that most of that clear plastic faced down on your desk where you couldn't really appreciate it. Personally, I think I actually have a slight preference for the new, cleaner look of the IO version, but it's tough to decide. Now, in addition to the change in appearance, the move to polycarbonate on the bottom case helps to contribute to a slight decrease in weight. This isn't currently reflected on NuPhy's website, but my IO model was about 8% lighter than the original 75% version. It's a small difference and won't be super noticeable, but if you're concerned about keeping your setup as light as possible for portability, it's a nice added bonus. For colors, there are 3 options for the IO version compared to 5 on the original Halo V2. They maintain this classic ionic white color, plus the obsidian black option and Sakura Fizz pink. Sadly, what is gone though are the bold mojito green and blue lagoon colors, which were super unique on this Halo lineup. It's a bummer to see them go, as the blue in particular was one of my favorite keyboard designs ever. For layouts, you can get the IO series in any of the original sizes, the small 65% model that keeps everything at your fingertips, the classic 75% model that gives you just about everything you could need other than a number pad, and the larger 96% model that gives you a number pad, albeit one with a small 0 key. The new versions of these layouts appear to be identical to the old ones, although I've only been hands-on with the 75% version. The only exception I could find from looking at pictures was on the 65% model. The 65% IO version appears to remove the function row labels on the number keys. This makes for a cleaner look, but is definitely less useful if you plan to actually use those functions. I'm assuming that the keys will still have all of the functions if you use them with the key combinations, but now you won't be able to see what they are visually. The next change is the switches. Gone are the older switch options of mint, lemon, and raspberry. In their place are the max switches, first introduced in the NuPhy Kick 75. This includes the linear red max and tactile brown max switches, which are made by Gatoron, plus the silent linear blush max switches, which are made by Kale. My model here has the silent blush max switches, which sound absolutely amazing. I don't have the other switches on hand to do a full comparison, but I will give you guys a quick sample to just see how the blush maxes sound. NuPhy continues to offer an incredible typing experience across all of their keyboards, and that doesn't change here. The keycap profile is the same as before, the overall size and shape of the board is identical, the two-stage adjustable feet and typing angles don't change. Everything that was great about the original Halo V2 continues on here, but there are a few more small physical changes. First, though the keycaps are the same size and shape, they no longer offer shine through on the homing bars, which was always a cool touch on this original series. Also removed is the Ghost Bar, a silicone dampened spacebar, which helps to remove rattles and other unwanted noise. Here's a comparison between the regular 65% model with the Blush Max switches and the new 75% I/O version with the same switches but without that Ghost Bar. As you can probably hear, the new spacebar doesn't sound bad, but it does sound slightly worse than the old one that did have the Ghost Bar. Finally, the last physical change is the little Halo logo on the top right of the board. Previously, this was a removable backlit badge. Now it is simply a shiny logo on the aluminum case. So to summarize the physical changes, the bottom case is no longer translucent, and the Halo light is now a single strip rather than the whole bottom case. The bottom case material change makes the board slightly lighter, though not super noticeable. There are fewer colors available. The function row labels on the 65% model are removed. There are newer switch offerings. The homing bars are no longer shine through. That Ghost Bar on the space bar is removed, and the Halo logo has changed slightly as well. You might already see a bit of a pattern with all of these changes, but we'll get there. First, we've got more to cover. On the top of that list is the change from QMK and VIA over to NuPhyIO for customization. If you're someone who likes to change functions, add macros, or otherwise make your keyboard your own, this is definitely impactful to you. If you simply like to take the keyboard out of the box and use it exactly as is, then you won't care about the specific changes here, but you will want to know about the impacts of the change, so don't just skip over this section. Now, first of all, QMK is an open source keyboard firmware that's used across much of the industry. It gives you a standard way to customize your keyboard and change the functionality to your liking. For most people, this means using VIA, a web-based customization tool, which lets you implement your changes. All of the original Halo V2 keyboards supported this. The new I/O series boards use a proprietary system that NuPhy themselves developed called NuPhyIO. Functionally, it's pretty similar to VIA. It's a web-based application, so no need to save any software onto your computer to make changes. And it saves those changes to the keyboard itself so that they can carry over to other computers if you use multiple devices in your workflow. It's also fairly full-featured and pretty user-friendly as well. So which one is better? Well, if you polled the majority of keyboard enthusiasts, they're probably going to pick QMK. And there's a few reasons why. First, it's standardized. So if you have a keyboard from another brand that also supports QMK, you can do the same things on either board. Second, by being open source, there is a community of people continuously contributing to improvements and changes. Support like this, in theory at least, should continue indefinitely, which may not be the case with proprietary software, which could be replaced, changed, or even discontinued by the company if they so choose. Finally, the third reason is auditability. Open source code can be reviewed to ensure that nothing shady is happening in the background. With proprietary software, it is a bit more of a black box. But that doesn't mean that there is no reason to pick NuPhyIO. In fact, when I polled my audience, around 75% either didn't care, preferred NuPhyIO, or said they'd be willing to accept it if it meant other benefits. Now, one great benefit of NuPhyIO over using VIA is with ease of use, especially if you are a beginner who is brand new to customizing keyboards. With NuPhyIO and with most proprietary systems, you simply plug in your keyboard, go to the site, click connect, and you're good to go. With VIA, you first need to download a file from NuPhy's website, then go to the VIA website, make sure the design tab is enabled, upload the file, then plug in and connect your keyboard for it to work properly. Neither one is too onerous in reality, but it is definitely easier that you don't need a separate file with the proprietary system. But usability isn't the biggest potential benefit of this new version. That is battery life. According to conversations I've had with NuPhy in the past, building a keyboard fit for QMK means following a specific set of hardware requirements. Those components end up being more power hungry and slightly more expensive than what you can use if you build with your own software. As a result, the I/O version of the Halo V2 has substantially improved battery life. With the same 4,000 milliamp hour battery, it gets 1,200 hours of use with backlighting off compared to just 200 to 300 hours on the regular version. So it makes sense why casual users in particular would be in favor of a change to NuPhyIO. Much better battery life while still having access to web-based customization if they decide they want to make a change. For those power users out there though, this could be a potential deal breaker. Now, I've tried my best to represent both sides as equally as possible, but I'm really curious where you guys stand. I know I referenced earlier to the survey that I conducted, but that was a small subset of respondents compared to the people that actually watch my videos. So if you've got strong feelings, let me know in the comments. I'd love to gauge where everybody's heads are at. Personally, I really value open source projects like QMK, and I'd love to support them as much as possible, especially because you never know when new leadership or future financial issues could cause a company like NuPhy to change their priorities with their software. However, from a day-to-day user perspective, charging your keyboard every few months rather than every few weeks is a pretty solid improvement for quality of life. The final set of changes that I wanted to cover are in the box. On the back of the keyboard, there is a storage slot for the 2.4 gig USB receiver. On the regular model, they also include a rubber stopper to plug this hole when you're not storing the receiver, but that has been removed on the I/O version. They've also removed the plastic dust cover from the boxes. This isn't something that I use personally, but for some folks out there, it might be missed. Finally, the USB cable included has been improved. On the original Halo 75 V2 and 96 V2, they included a USB-A to USB-C cable. Beginning on the Halo 65 V2 and continuing on with the I/O versions, there is now a USB-C to C cable with a USB-A adapter, giving you a bit more flexibility for your use. So now that we've covered the many small and large changes with this new version of the Halo series, what has all of that done to the price? Well, nothing. The pricing is exactly the same. $120 for the 65% model, $130 for the 75%, and $140 for the 96%. The only improvement to pricing is that there is no longer an upcharge for the silent switches, which was not the case previously with the silent red clear top switches, which previously cost $10 more. I'll be very honest here. When I first got word of this keyboard, I just assumed that it would be cheaper than the original. Much of this expectation comes from the experience with NuPhy's Kick 75. The Kick 75 was available in either a QMK version or a NuPhyIO version. By picking NuPhyIO, you saved $20 off of the retail price, which NuPhy explained to me via email stemmed from variations in hardware costs and PCB complexity, which I kind of alluded to earlier. So based on that experience, I assumed that this new keyboard would also be cheaper. One possible explanation why this isn't the case could be the battery. With the Kick 75, the NuPhyIO version had a smaller battery inside. Since it was more power efficient, it wound up getting roughly the same battery life as the QMK version, but they chose to make this trade-off, which definitely would have contributed to some of that difference in price. On the Halo model, both versions have the same size battery, so maybe that is part of the reason why they're the same price. But then you start to look at the rest of the changes that were made, and you begin to see that pattern that I referred to earlier. There are quite a few changes here with the new model that would definitely decrease costs for NuPhy compared to the original. The internal hardware, the chips, the PCB design, etc. is obviously number one. The removal of the ghost bar saves some more money. The keycaps no longer having shine through on the homing bar decreases complexity and should save some money. The Halo logo is also less complex, which should be cheaper. There's fewer colors and fewer switch offerings, which reduces the number of unique SKUs needed, helping with both production and inventory costs. There's no rubber stopper for the USB slot and no dust cover in the box as well. None of these are substantial cost savings, but they should all add up. On the other side of the coin, there are indeed a few things that will add cost for NuPhy as well. The USB-C to C cable will cost more. The new switches are slightly more expensive, at least based on how they're priced when you buy them separately. And finally, the bottom case moving from ABS to polycarbonate should cost more, at least based on a quick Google search. I don't actually know much about bulk plastic pricing. So I think you can probably see where I'm going with this. I expected this new keyboard to cost less than the original Halo model, just based on precedent alone. Many of the changes that occurred here that I wasn't expecting, for the most part, aligned with that expectation, but the final pricing did not. Now, I asked NuPhy whether this I/O series was going to replace the regular Halo V2, and I was told that they will coexist full stop. However, I think it's clear that NuPhy is moving away from QMK and towards their own NuPhyIO software. They offered both with the Kick 75 this year, which I talked about earlier. The latest Air 75 V3 exclusively uses NuPhyIO, and I wouldn't be surprised if the newly teased Node 75 is also purely NuPhyIO. Given all of that, since you have the option, at least today, which one is actually better? Well, there are certainly reasons to consider either one. Starting with the original model, the QMK and VIA compatibility is a big one for power users, as it gives you access to all the open source features and improvements that the keyboard community comes up with, along with pretty much guaranteed long-term support and auditable code to ensure no funny business. It has the blue and green color options, which are really cool and unique. Finally, there are all the incredible little features like the ghost bar, the clear bottom case, color matched internals, shine through homing bars, that weird little removable Halo logo, and the rubber stopper for the USB slot. Collectively, those helped to make the original Halo V2 one of the most over-engineered keyboards that I've tested to date. On the NuPhyIO version, there is much better battery life, which is always welcome on a keyboard, and depending on how you use it, could be a huge deal for you. The look is a little bit cleaner in my opinion, with the single LED strip around the edges. The NuPhyIO software is slightly more user-friendly since it avoids the need to download a file. And finally, though pricing is the same, you can save $5 more with code Cameron15 on the I/O version compared to the regular code on the standard version. I was really torn when I was evaluating this I/O series keyboard. In a vacuum, it's a fantastic keyboard. It's a lot like the original, but with better battery life and a new, slightly cleaner look. What's not to love? But when you compare it side by side, it is hard not to feel like some of the soul of the original V2 was stripped out, and all you really have to show for it is $5 extra savings on a coupon code. Now, don't get me wrong, these are both great keyboards, and I recommend either one. If the I/O version was $20 cheaper though, just like with the Kick 75, this would be a no-brainer. But at the same price, I can't make a clear declaration like that. If you are drawn to the QMK compatibility or the extra colors and features of that original, definitely stick with that. If you prefer NuPhyIO or are indifferent to the customization, this new keyboard offers a nearly identical experience with substantially longer battery life, which is also great. It's not super clear-cut to me, but if it is to you, I'd love to hear which side you fall on. Now, remember to check out the links in the video description if you want to pick up this keyboard or any others. Consider subscribing if you found this whole breakdown helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.